Ooh, this is my favorite mask. For some reason, for like the first several weeks that I had it, I kept wearing it upside down because apparently I don't know how teeth work. Um, Events are just like so bad. There's just no reason to talk about them, and like you know what they are anyway. So I'm just gonna vlog about my day to day life, masks, and the media that I've been consuming. I decided to move back home from work because I was kind of waiting until more public transit was restored, but I guess I've started to realize that if we close up again or something like that, then like it may not be restored for a really, really, really long time. And I feel like um, I'm just not built to live with other people, and I just felt like I was getting really grumpy with like my clients' family and stuff because I just like really prefer to be in my own space. And I'm like, whew, I'm so lucky that like last year I like moved to like an in-law garage apartment instead of like living with roommates like I used to, because I used to live in a house with like five housemates, and it was like really small and crowded, and I just can't imagine like how um gosh, that would be so unpleasant being stuck at home like that. But yeah, being back in my room is quite nice. The thing is that because transit isn't restored, I have to walk either like all the way to work or like half of the way to work. There's one bus that will take me on like the first leg of my trip to work. So I take that and like walk half of the way to work in the morning, and then I walk all the way back at night. And it's like just like with, according to my phone, which if you have an iPhone, you may not even know this, but it's keeping track of all of your steps. And like when I first found this out several years ago, it was like a huge bummer. It was like, wow, I thought I was like active, but I walked like a mile in this entire day. Now it's like I'm walking like 5 to 10 miles every day. And like I was walking back and forth between home and work like every weekend and stuff, and basically walking anywhere I needed to go because of the lack of transit. So it was kind of like, it was already kind of a lot, but now it's just like 5 to 10 miles a day. And I consider myself like a relatively active person, but like these days I'm just like fully exhausted all the time. I I think it's partly because I feel like I'm fairly strong because of the type of work that I do, and I have endurance, but I've never really, I have like no tolerance for like cardio type exercise. And like living in San Francisco, I have to basically like hike back and forth to work, and it's like so exhausting. Um, yeah, so I'm so fucking tired. Anyways, some observations about masks. I cannot show it to you because it's still at work, but I was in the process of packing up some of my things, and I am a fan of Captain America and the Winter Soldier, and I have Funko Pops of them. And I was looking at my Winter Soldier Funko Pop, which I had brought to work as a decoration, and like it just hit me that like we're all the Winter Soldier. Like, like I feel like in the movie it's like, ooh, who's this creepy guy? He's like wearing a mask that covers his whole face. Like, how disturbing. But now we just like all are. It was just kind of funny because it made me think like if Captain America 2 came out today, like the Winter Soldier wouldn't even seem like that weird or mysterious. It would just be like, oh, that's everyone I know. Yeah. I also was thinking about the slit mouthed woman, which is ooh, I want to say it's like a Japanese urban legend, but somewhere where because of pollution, it's been like fairly common for like a lot of people to wear masks outside. So, there's like this whole urban legend about like this woman who's like wearing a mask, and like underneath her mask, she has like a Glasgow smile. And like, I don't know, it's an interesting urban legend because, like, as an American, it always seemed very alien to me because it's not common for Americans to walk around wearing masks all the time, or at least it wasn't before. And it's like an interesting story because it's like based around something that like is very common and normal in the place where the story is told, um, but like isn't relatable to Americans. But I guess it's kind of interesting to think that like anything can become normal, and like masks now are normal. Um, Obviously should be normal everywhere, but aren't, but in San Francisco, are very normal. And I was thinking about two mask observations. One is that I have this sort of form of like mild road rage personally when I'm like walking around, and like the route that I take, the places that I walk in places that are fairly like unpopulated, so I can, I have got my headphones on and they hold my mask to my head, and so then I just like walk around like this a lot of the time. And if I approach someone, I put the mask on, or if I'm just walking by someone quickly, I'll just hold it up to my face like this. And like, yeah, I have this mild sense of road rage because like I don't like putting the mask on. So, I'm like walking around and I can like see someone walking in the distance, and I'm like, are they walking towards me or away from me? Please be walking away. And like they're walking towards me, and I'm like, okay, please like be turning and going the other way. And they're like still walking towards me, and like in my head I'm like, fuck you. Now I have to put a mask on, and I'm like extremely resentful. I'm sure the other person is probably thinking the same thing. I felt kind of bad because I just had gotten some pizza. I like I live in a place that isn't like super close to a lot of food places, but I'm still pretty lucky. There's like a lot of places to get takeout, and I don't really cook and haven't really gotten around to like figuring out like meals at home yet. So I usually get takeout, but like because of the situation, like the places that are open are just like closing a bit earlier, and it takes me so long to get home that they're all closed except for the one pizza place, which just God bless it. I guess I don't want to say the name because like I would be revealing like exactly where I live, because I live like across the street from it. But like they have an interesting sign where they like advertise all these types of food that they don't actually have, like burgers and pasta and stuff, when they really only have pizza. And then like their whole name and branding like makes it seem as if they also have like Thai food, but like they usually don't. I think like maybe their like original idea for the restaurant like many years ago involved all these other types of food that they didn't turn out to actually sell. Yeah, anyway, I really think that they are great. I'm really talking at length. I bet I'm going to get cut off. Sorry. But yeah, so I really appreciate them because they're like one of the only pizza places I've ever known where you can get a slice with any kinds of toppings that you want, and they'll just make the slice for you. So that's nice because I feel like I end up having to eat there like almost every night because they're the only open place. So at least I can get different toppings on my pizza even though I'm eating pizza every day. Anyways, I was waiting for my pizza, and like while I'm waiting for my pizza, I go outside and kind of like walk around in the dark and listen to my podcast. And I was trying to sort of like, I was looking around in the dark streets and I saw this person, and I was like, are they coming towards me? Are they not coming towards me? I got all crabby. And I was like listening, so I like couldn't hear what was going on. And I was like, I was trying to find sort of like a private-ish area where I could like kind of stand back from the street and like take off my mask and like breathe the air and hopefully not have a lot of people like walking by. So meanwhile, I just feel like a dick. I've been listening to podcasts so much when I walk around that I feel like this is like the most podcast heavy period of my life. And also at work, like especially when I was living at work, I would like listen to podcasts like whenever I was doing anything in the house, I think to have like more of a sense of like privacy kind of. So I just, yeah, I'm like constantly listening to stuff and like not engaging with people at all. This lady was trying to come out of her house and like put out her trash, and I was standing in front of her house and blocking her. Like I must have just been like this dark, shadowy figure that was like blocking her from coming out of her house. So I feel like an asshole. I basically like, it's kind of a bummer that I'm like, oh, I really miss people. I miss being around people. But then, like, whenever I interact with people, I feel like I'm so unfriendly and crabby. I really, I do worry that, like, this whole situation is making people more and more crabby, but maybe it's just me. Sorry, I'm just stretching. My back is, like, on fire. But, yeah. My other mask observation, it's not really a thing. There's just, like, something slightly, I mean, this whole situation is like dystopian. I feel like that's the only the only good thing you can say for this is that like life has this weird ambiance where it feels like a genre movie. Like life has just changed to become so odd. But I guess something I think is kind of interesting, like when I'm walking along, I'll look up and like I'll see a face far away, and then like a lot of the time you don't see people's masks because a lot of people will like wear their mask like this and then like pull it up when they see people, and or things like that, or I guess they do what I do. So like I see a face and then like I'll look down for a second, and then like when I look up, just like the face is gone. And there's something kind of like spooky about that, and like the fact that I've like recently become like used to that like exact experience. um the face, and then like the face disappears as it comes closer and you're like never close to a face. Very spooky. um what else? Oh yeah, I was gonna shill for the podcast I've been listening to, which is called The Shrieking Shack. I really, I often will like get really into a podcast and listen to it a lot, but that's been true for the last couple of years. But like this is one where it's extremely long. Like every episode is like 2 hours long, and there's like 100 and something episodes and going strong. But like I've listened to like 50 episodes in the last like 2 or 3 weeks, so that's like more than 100 hours of like podcast basically. And I've neglected like every other TV show or like thing that I was doing or watching because like I'm enjoying it so much, and I haven't like listened to any other podcasts, and I still haven't gotten tired of it. So anyway, it's called The Shrieking Shack, and they bill themselves as a Harry Potter reread for lapsed fans. It's really interesting because the hosts have sort of the same attitude about Harry Potter that I guess I and a lot of people have, where like I was really obsessed with the books growing up and like thought they were so great and like magical and special, and then like there was like a certain point in like the later books, or kind of like looking back on things, where like you could see that like the books took a dive in quality, and then it's kind of like, wait, were the books ever that good? Like that's sort of one thing they were sort of questioning in the podcast. Like they did think that like the first and third books like were good, but they still had things they really didn't like about them that they had kind of like papered over in their memories. But they thought the second book was like really bad, and the fourth book was really bad, and they were saying that like in their narrative they had imagined that like the fifth book was when things got bad. um yeah, I guess like what's really enjoyable about the podcast is just that the hosts are really funny and like interesting, and they are reading the book extremely slowly. And there's something interesting about like hearing about something that you read a lot as a kid, because it's like almost like you don't really have conscious memories of it, but like whenever you hear it being described, like you suddenly realize that you are very familiar with all these things, and like that's kind of enjoyable. But I also just think like they're really smart, and like the way they analyze things is really interesting. They kind of have brought up a lot of things that are problematic. I don't know why I'm using quotes, and I know this is going to be the thumbnail for the video. I don't think of myself as like a huge finger quoter, but like apparently I am, because the thumbnails for all my videos are me doing finger quotes. So yeah, they talk about things that are interesting, like the goblins are like really anti-Semitic, or like they talk a lot about like the whole spew thing and how it's really weird and fucked up that like Hermione caring about you know basically like beings, basically people being enslaved, is like treated as a joke, and that like Rowling tries to use it as like an example of like dumb student activism, where you're like, I don't know, advocating for a group of people without asking them or something. But like because it's about slavery, it just ends up actually like being real bad. And I first listened to the podcast when I listened to what was at the time like one of the most recent episodes, where they talked a lot about Rowling being a TERF. They basically did like a special episode where they just sort of talked about that and like analyzed her TERF essay. And right away I like knew that I was in good hands, because I'm sure I've discussed this. Sometimes you meet people who don't have a problem with trans people, but they're not familiar with TERFs, and they don't recognize like the way that TERFs talk and some of the things that TERFs say. Like, like TERFs will sometimes say things that sound like normal if you don't know, but they're kind of dog whistles. So for someone like me who has more experience, it's like, but like, other people will be like, oh, what's wrong with that? Like, I don't get it, or something like that. And so it was really nice to listen to these two people discuss it, because like they like are very familiar, and like they didn't really they weren't really at like an entry level with it. They just like were able to discuss it as people that are very familiar with that type of rhetoric. So that episode was really good, and so I ended up going back and I've been listening to the whole thing. The show has 3 segments. Like, first, they start out by talking about any news about the Harry Potter franchise or J.K. Rowling. Then they do the reading, and then they'll just go into some like funny fandom thing. Like, this doesn't sound like it would be as funny as it is, but I don't know. It kind of reminds me of those like Jenny Nicholson like spider review videos or whatever, where she'll just kind of like read random comments and stuff. And one of the hosts sounds very similar to Jenny Nicholson, so it's like a similar vibe. And they'll go and they'll just like read, like, they'll just go on the Harry Potter Reddit where people seem to just be having like the most like silly conversations, like extremely passionately over and over, and they'll just like read them and discuss them. I know this doesn't sound that good, but it's like extremely funny. I've just like found myself laughing and smiling quite a lot. I'm really glad to like have something that I enjoy consuming so much right now. It's really just keeping me together to be able to listen to the Shrieking Shack. I thought one of the funniest posts was this one where somebody was like, they tried to figure out like how tall each Harry Potter character was based on whether they were described as tall and like whether they were described as like taller and shorter than other characters. But like 2 of the commenters got in like a huge fight about whether Harry was tall, and it was like, you obviously are just like passionate about Harry being tall, but like really he's short. It was so good. Yeah. Oh, the other piece of media that I've consumed is Gideon the Ninth. You're probably familiar with this book. It was extremely hyped. I don't read that much, and I often kind of read random books, so I wasn't planning to read this, especially because I always carry books around, and this book is like a little bit more of a brick. I like small paperbacks so I can carry them. But my dad gave me this book like a while back, like last year, and then a friend of mine and I decided to read it because we both had been given it. It's like a wonderful book. The cover quote says that it's about lesbian necromancers, and like every review that I see like starts with somebody saying actually the main character is a lesbian but not a necromancer. um, I'm not very into like necromancy or skeletons and stuff, and like when I started reading the book and it was like just about like this necromancer making like a ton of skeletons fight the main character, I like was extremely bored and was like, oh my gosh, like how am I gonna get through this? It's so grim dark. um, but there weren't as many skeletons as I was afraid of, and I would say the lesbian content generally isn't between the necromancers, but like all the necromancers are really kind of intellectual and like have like weak noodle arms and are kind of sickly, because that's kind of like the constitution of the necromancers in the book. And so they all have bodyguards, and so the book, it's basically like all the necromancers and their bodyguards just all have these like kind of complicated, interesting relationships. And like the main character is like the bodyguard of a necromancer who she like hates but has a crush on, and then she just gets a crush on like every woman necromancer that she meets. And like it's a very fun and satisfying book. I was a bit put off because I thought it was going to be, I don't know, there's like a certain type of fantasy writing that I find to be kind of dry. This book is written in like a somewhat weird style in that it's like very modern day, like memey, even though it takes place in like sort of a science fiction fantasy type universe that isn't modern day at all. So that made it very enjoyable and fun to read. I would recommend it to, really, I would say anybody, because I feel like if my dad and I can both come away from a book really liking it, with my dad and me being like as different as we are and like having very different tastes in fiction and stuff, I feel like maybe it's just like this book that molds itself to anybody or something. I even read this review on Goodreads where this straight woman, although she didn't like the book, but she was arguing that the book wasn't actually gay, and she kept like taking evidence of the main character being gay and saying that she just thought that all the women that she liked were like interesting people, or she liked them as friends. It was actually like somewhat infuriating. Anyway, I really enjoyed Gideon the Ninth, and I recommend it. Well, okay, this isn't as long as I thought it was going to be. I want to recommend The Shrieking Shack and Gideon the Ninth because they're really great. Um, I think in my personal, like, San Francisco bubble where everybody wears a mask, it's kind of hard to know that there's places where people don't wear them. Obviously, I'm pretty defensive of, like, people who can't wear a mask because of disabilities and stuff like that. But, like, it's still possible to learn to wear one some of the time. Usually, like, you should try to do that if you can. And I think it's hard because I feel like I'm in this, like, intense mask shaming climate. But I know there's, like, a lot of places where most people don't wear masks, and I think that's, like, kind of bad. So I hope if you live in a place like that, you would consider wearing a mask, even if it's not the norm. Um, a friend who lives in Oklahoma told me that when she wears a mask, men, like, are super into her and have, like, a mask kink and, like, approach her and, like, hit on her all the time, which sounds like a bit unpleasant and uncomfortable. So I'm sorry if that happens to you because of me trying to convince you to wear a mask, but it would be a good thing to do. Um, you know, I think for the individual person, we're not that likely to become sick or become seriously ill. That's always been true, but we are pretty likely to harm another person by spreading COVID, so um, it's great to wear a mask as much as you can. I mean, I don't even know. I'm sure anybody who's watching this knows that they should wear a mask. Yeah, okay, that's my vlog.